The galaxy learned the news in a single synchronized heartbeat. From the crystal towers of Velaris Prime to the drifting monasteries of the Kuiper ascetics, every relay repeated the same impossible announcement. The alien queen had married a human. At first, the translators stuttered. Then the diplomats laughed. Then the admirals began to panic. Queen Zyrath of the Aurelian Spiral was not merely royalty, she was a living constant in galactic politics. She had ruled for 3 centuries, her consciousness woven into bioluminous flesh that glowed like a star at dusk. Her species, the Seraphi, were ancient, calculating, and famously uninterested in humans beyond trade contracts and archaeological curiosity. And yet, on a ceremonial platform orbiting the violet sun of Lithos, she had taken a human spouse. The image replayed endlessly across the galaxy. A towering Seraphi queen, her crown of living light arcing behind her like wings, standing beside a man who looked painfully ordinary by comparison. Dark hair, human brown eyes, formal attire that tried and failed to disguise his nervous posture. His name was Elias Mercer, former xenolinguistics consultant, Terran citizen, and until that moment, utterly unknown to history. No one had seen it coming. The panic did not begin with outrage, but with calculation. The trade syndicates froze shipments. The border fleets went to high alert. The elder councils convened emergency sessions that lasted for days without adjournment. If the Queen had chosen a human, then something fundamental had changed. On Earth, the reaction was no calmer. News channels argued over whether Elias Mercer was a hero, a traitor, or an accidental pawn. Conspiracy forums exploded with theories about mind control, ancient prophecies, and secret human superiority programs that did not exist. Elias himself watched none of it. He sat alone in a quiet chamber aboard the Seraphi flagship Radiant Accord, hands clasped together, breathing slowly as the walls shimmered with living light. The chamber responded to his heartbeat, glowing softly as if the ship itself were curious about him. 3 months ago, he had been translating dead languages on a research outpost near the Perseus Veil. Now he was married to the most powerful being in known space. The door unfolded rather than opened, petals of light parting to reveal Queen Zyrath. She moved with a grace that bent perception, her elongated form shifting subtly as she crossed the room. To human eyes, she appeared feminine, but Elias knew that was only his brain struggling to interpret something far more complex. "You are trembling," she said, her voice resonating directly inside his mind and ears both. "I think the galaxy is screaming louder than I am," Elias replied, forcing a smile. Her eyes, pools of liquid starlight, softened. "They will adapt," she said. "They always do." Elias laughed quietly, a brittle sound. "They deployed fleets in under an hour." "Because they fear uncertainty," Zyrath replied, settling beside him, her presence warming the air. "And you represent a variable they cannot model." He looked at her then, truly looked. At the ancient intelligence behind her gaze. At the faint shimmer of power that never left her skin. "Why me?" he asked, not for the first time. Zyrath was silent for a moment, which for her kind meant careful thought rather than hesitation. "Because you listened," she said at last. She extended a slender limb, brushing his hand with a touch that sent a ripple of sensation through his nervous system. "When my envoys spoke, you heard the meanings between the words," she continued. "When my historians debated, you questioned assumptions even they had forgotten were assumptions." Elias swallowed. "That seems like a low bar for marrying into interstellar royalty." A flicker of amusement passed through her bioluminescence. "For a Seraphi queen, it is not." Their union had not been born of sudden passion, at least not in the way humans romanticized. It had begun with conversation, long exchanges stretching across months. Philosophy, mortality, the burden of continuity, the loneliness of ruling across centuries. Zyrath had found something in Elias that her own people rarely possessed anymore. A willingness to be small in the presence of the vast. The Seraphi court had not approved. They had calculated probabilities, weighed risks, and advised delay. But the Queen had invoked an ancient prerogative, older than their empire. The right to choose her own bond. That right had not been exercised in over 1,000 years. Across the galaxy, the High Council of the Triune Compact convened in a chamber large enough to contain a small moon. Representatives projected themselves as towering avatars, each radiating cultural symbols of power and legitimacy. "This is destabilization," declared the Varkeen delegate, his chitinous form bristling. "Humans are impulsive, short-lived, and politically volatile. They are also adaptable," countered the Lumen archivist, "which may be precisely the point." A murmur rippled through the chamber. No one liked that interpretation. The Seraphi Empire had always been distant but predictable. A queen bound to a human-introduced empathy where there had once been only equilibrium. Empathy was dangerous. Back aboard the Radiant Accord, Elias paced the chamber. Every surface responded to his movement, glowing brighter, dimmer, curious. "I didn't ask for this," he said quietly. "I didn't ask to be a symbol." Zyrath watched him, her expression unreadable in human terms. "Symbols are rarely willing," she said, "but they are necessary when civilizations reach an impasse." He stopped, turning to face her. "And what impasse is that?" "The one where survival outpaces wisdom," she replied. "The galaxy has learned how to endure, but not how to understand." Outside the viewport, stars drifted past like slow thoughts. Somewhere among them, fleets were mobilizing, treaties were being rewritten, and fear was hardening into policy. On Earth, Elia's family was under protective custody. On Seraphi worlds, conservative factions whispered of abdication and succession crises. The marriage had already changed everything. That night, Elias dreamed of standing on a bridge between two stars. Each pulled at him with equal gravity. And beneath his feet, the structure was still forming, strand by strand. When he woke, Zyrath was watching him. "Your neural patterns spike during rest," she observed gently. "I think that's called anxiety," he replied. She inclined her head, a gesture she had learned from humans. "It will diminish," she said, "or it will shape you into what the galaxy requires." Elias exhaled slowly. "No pressure." Far away, a military commander stared at the same wedding image and whispered, "This is how empires fall." On another world, a child watched it and felt something unfamiliar, hope. And at the center of it all, a human and a queen sat together in a living ship, aware that love, however quietly it began, could terrify entire civilizations. The galaxy had panicked, and it was only the beginning. The first consequence of the marriage was silence. Not peace, but the kind of quiet that follows a scream too large to echo. Across diplomatic channels, messages queued without response. Treaties were neither broken nor honored, simply suspended in a state of anxious hesitation. Everyone waited for someone else to make the first irreversible move. Queen Zyrath understood this phase well. Civilizations, like individuals, revealed their truest nature when confronted with ambiguity. She stood before the conclave of light, the Seraphi governing body whose members shimmered as living constellations around her. Their forms pulsed with restrained agitation. "You have bound yourself to impermanence," said Elder Kayla, his voice fracturing into harmonic overtones. "The human lifespan is a flicker." Zyrath did not raise her voice. "Then I will treasure each flicker," she replied. A ripple of bioluminescent unrest passed through the conclave. This was not defiance, but something far more unsettling: conviction. You risk destabilizing continuity, another elder projected. Our empire survives because we think in centuries. And stagnates because you fear moments, the queen answered. Elias Mercer reminds me that meaning does not require eternity. The name alone caused several elders to dim reflexively. A human name spoken in the heart of Seraphi authority still felt like a violation of natural order. Meanwhile, Elias was discovering just how heavy his shadow had become. He walked through the inner gardens of the flagship, a space grown rather than constructed. Alien flora curled and unfolded as he passed, sensing his movement, adjusting to his biology. The ship had been designed for beings who did not sweat, did not stumble, did not age. Now it learned him cell by cell. A Seraphi attendant approached, their form flickering with polite uncertainty. "Consort Mercer," they said, testing the title as if it might dissolve. "There are requests." Elias sighed softly. "Let me guess, Earth, the trade syndicates, and someone accusing me of being a covert invasion strategy." The attendant's glow shifted, an approximation of surprise. "Yes. Schedule them," Elias said after a pause. "If I'm going to be blamed for the galaxy's existential crisis, I might as well show up." The first transmission came from Earth's United Planetary Council. Familiar faces stared back at him, some relieved, some furious, all afraid. Elias, the Secretary General, began, "You have to understand how this looks." "I do," Elias replied. "It looks like a human accidentally married a god and broke everyone's risk models." That earned a few startled expressions. "Are you under coercion?" another counselor demanded. Elias glanced toward Zyrath, who stood just out of frame, luminous and silent. "No," he said evenly. "I chose this." The room erupted into overlapping protests. "You don't have the authority. You're compromising humanity's neutrality. You could trigger a preemptive strike." Elias raised a hand, surprising himself with how natural the gesture felt. "Humanity has spent centuries asking to be taken seriously," he said. "Well, congratulations, they're terrified of us now." The channel cut shortly after, not in agreement, but in overwhelmed retreat. The trade syndicates were next, their representatives smiling too broadly. "We see opportunity," they purred. "Exclusive access, preferential tariffs, symbolic endorsements." "No," Elias said immediately. "That's not what this is." "What is it then?" the representative asked, irritation leaking through. "It's a relationship," Elias replied. "And if you try to turn my marriage into a commodity, my wife will dismantle your economic model out of spite." Behind him, Zyrath's bioluminescence brightened just enough to confirm the threat. After the calls ended, Elias felt hollowed out. "I'm not qualified for this," he said quietly. Zyrath approached, her presence steady, grounding. "Neither was I when I first ascended," she said. "Leadership is rarely about qualification, it is about endurance." Elsewhere, endurance was already failing. Along the outer borders of the Triune Compact, a skirmish erupted between patrol fleets. No official declaration accompanied it, just a misinterpreted maneuver, a delayed response, a weapon discharged too quickly. Within hours, analysts labeled it the first marriage incident. On the desert world of Kairos, a human colony governor stared at evacuation reports. "If they decide humans are now politically dangerous," she whispered, "we're exposed everywhere." Fear began to migrate. It settled into policies, hardened into doctrines. The phrase hybrid influence risk entered classified briefings. So did preemptive containment. Zyrath sensed it all through the vast informational currents her kind maintained. The galaxy was not exploding, but it was cracking along invisible fault lines. She summoned Elias to the observation deck. Stars wheeled beyond the transparent barrier, ancient and indifferent. "They are preparing," she said. "For war?" Elias asked, his stomach tightening. "For certainty," she corrected. "War is simply one of its byproducts." He leaned against the railing, suddenly very human, very small. "Did we make a mistake?" he asked. Zyrath considered the question carefully. "Mistakes imply deviation from a correct path," she said. "I believe there was no correct path left." Before Elias could respond, alarms chimed softly. Not an emergency tone, but a formal alert. "A delegation requests immediate audience," the ship announced. Independent, unaligned. The delegation arrived in person, a rare and dangerous gesture. Their vessel docked without transmitting allegiance codes. They were the mere collective, a species known for abandoning failing civilizations before collapse. Nomads of the end of eras. Their speaker stepped forward, a shifting mass of reflective surfaces. "We came to see if the stories were true," they said. "They are." They turned their many-faceted gaze to Elias. "A human bonded to a queen." "What do you want?" Elias asked. "To know," the Mir replied. "Is this the beginning of convergence?" Zyrath answered before Elias could. "Yes." A sharp intake of breath rippled through the delegation. "Then the panic is justified," they said. "Convergence always precedes transformation." "And transformation precedes survival," Zyrath countered. The Mir were silent for a long moment. Then they bowed, a gesture of rare respect. "We will watch," they said, "and we will decide whether to stay." After they departed, Elias let out a shaky breath. "That felt ominous." "It was," Zyrath agreed. As the radiant accord shifted course, moving not toward any capital but into open space, Elias realized the truth settling into his bones. Their marriage was no longer a scandal. It was a catalyst. Somewhere admirals revised battle plans. Somewhere philosophers rewrote axioms. Somewhere a young species saw a path they had never believed was open to them. Elias took Zyrathel's hand, feeling the subtle hum of power beneath her skin. "If this ends badly," he said, "history is going to hate us." "History always does," she replied. "Until it realizes it needed us." The stars ahead did not rearrange themselves. But the space between them felt charged, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The galaxy did not collapse into war, as many had predicted. Instead, it bent. Like metal under sustained pressure, it warped slowly, groaning in places no one had thought to reinforce. In the months following the marriage, the phrase human variable appeared in strategic simulations across 100 species. Not as an advantage or a threat, but as an unknown that refused to stabilize. Elias felt that uncertainty every day. It followed him through corridors that reshaped themselves to his gate. It watched him from the eyes of ambassadors who smiled too carefully. He was no longer simply a person. He was a question walking on two legs. The first real test came without warning. A Seraphi listening array detected an anomaly near the relic's expanse. A region of space long avoided due to gravitational inconsistencies and relic radiation. Something ancient had stirred, something massive. The Triune Compact immediately assumed the worst. Mobilization orders were issued. Borders tightened. And then someone noticed the timing. The anomaly had activated less than a standard cycle after the Queen's union with a human. Correlation bloomed into suspicion. Elias sat through the emergency briefing, watching three-dimensional projections twist above the table. "I didn't wake up a cosmic horror," he muttered. Not intentionally, one delegate replied dryly. Zyrathiel's glow sharpened. Careful, she warned. This phenomenon predates humanity's first spark. The anomaly resolved into a structure, colossal and symmetrical, hidden within folded space. Seraphi records identified it with unease. A convergence engine, built by a civilization older than the Seraphi, older than recorded history. Its purpose was not conquest, but synthesis. It activated when multiple species reached technological maturity without achieving philosophical alignment. In simpler terms, it forced cooperation or extinction. The panic returned, stronger than before. Religious factions declared the marriage a trigger. Militaries prepared to destroy what they could not understand. Elias stared at the projection, feeling very far from his old life. "You're telling me the universe installed a fail-safe," he said. "Yes," Zyrathiel replied. "And it has determined that the galaxy is failing." The Seraphi elders demanded immediate action. Destroy the engine, sever its influence, preserve autonomy. But the engine was shielded by spacetime distortions that deflected force and absorbed energy. Any attack would escalate its activation. Elias listened to hours of debate, his head pounding. At last he spoke. "What if it's not meant to be attacked?" he said. The chamber fell quiet. Dozens of eyes turned toward him, some curious, some hostile. "It's not a weapon," Elias continued. "It's a test." "A test we did not consent to," an admiral snapped. "No," Elias agreed. "But neither did the civilizations it's trying to save." Zyrathiel studied him closely. "Go on," she said. Elias took a breath, steadying himself. "Every species here is afraid of losing control," he said. "You fear empathy because it makes outcomes unpredictable." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "But what if unpredictability is the point?" Elias continued. "What if the engine activates when logic alone stops being enough?" Silence followed, heavy and uncomfortable. The convergence engine began broadcasting. Not in language, but in patterns. Mathematical harmonies interwoven with emotional resonance. It reached into neural substrates, translation matrices, even instinctive reflexes. Each species experienced it differently. Elias felt it as memory. Childhood moments, mistakes, quiet kindnesses. Zyrathiel felt it as compression. Centuries of decision-making folding inward, revealing the cost of every compromise she had ever made. Across the galaxy, leaders reeled. Some collapsed. Some raged. Some wept. "This is psychological warfare," someone shouted. "No," Zyrathiel said softly. "It is reflection." The engine demanded representatives. Not armies, not algorithms. Representatives willing to enter its field and negotiate a new equilibrium. Every major power refused. Elias did not. "I'll go," he said, before fear could stop him. Zyrathiel turned sharply, her light flaring. "No, it's already tuned to me," Elias argued. "You said yourself, I'm a variable." "That is precisely why you cannot be risked," she replied. He met her gaze, steady. "You didn't marry me because I was safe," he said. The words hung between them, fragile and true. After a long moment, Zyrathiel inclined her head. "Then you will not go alone," she said. They approached the engine together, their vessel dwarfed by its vast geometry. Reality bent around it like light around a black hole. As they crossed the threshold, Elias felt his sense of self stretch. He was human. He was more. The engine spoke, not with sound but with certainty. Convergence, CANDIDATES confirmed. It recognized them not as ruler and consort, but as bridge and anchor. Within the engine, time fractured. Elias saw futures splinter and recombine. Wars avoided by moments of understanding. Empires falling because they refused to change. The engine did not demand obedience. It demanded integration. Why us? Elias asked, his thoughts echoing. Because you chose bond over optimization, the engine replied. Zyrath felt something unprecedented, doubt. Not in Elias, but in the supremacy of her own species, methods. The engine offered a choice. Restructure galactic governance around shared vulnerability, or face gradual collapse as isolation intensified. When they emerged, the galaxy was waiting. Weapons charged, doctrines ready. Elias spoke first, his voice carried across every channel. This is not an invasion, he said. It's an intervention. Some listened. Some did not. But the weight of becoming had settled, and the galaxy could no longer pretend it was unchanged.